All right, freaks. I want to talk to you about power. Even if you are going to be pretty primitive in your camping, you still need a few basic essential items. A phone, a Garmin inReach, some lights, something along those lines. And when that comes up, how do you power those things, So a lot of us don't do ultra primitive. Most of us do comfort camping, we'll call it. Okay, so what I have today is I have my whole range of how I keep myself powered on the road. Okay, so what we're going to start with is some basic terminology. First of all, we're going to deal with watts and watt hours, not amps. It's easier to wrap your head around watts than it is amps. Okay, so most of your devices that you're going to use are relatively low wattage. My little USB fans that I keep in the Jeep, they're 4 watts. It's almost nothing. That's just a trickle. But say like a 5,000 BTU window air conditioner, that's going to run you 500, 600, 700 watts. A hair dryer can be up to 1,500 watts. A coffee maker can be 1,000, 1,200 watts. So it's important to know what you are wanting to power. For me, most of the time, my power needs are relatively light. Today I brought my 12-volt fridge, just as an example. Didn't really need it. A cooler would have been better. I kind of reserve the 12-volt fridge for when I have longer campouts. Do have to constantly be going in for ice and that kind of thing. So the next thing we want to talk about is watt hours. Okay, so what is a watt hour? So if watts that's power output, watt hours is battery capacity, or how long will the battery power a certain item. Okay, for instance, if you have a 100-watt item that you're wanting to power, and your battery pack, something like one of these, is 1,000 watt hours. Well, 1,000 watt hours divided by 100 watts is 10 hours. In other words, it will power it for about 10 hours. Say you've got a smaller unit, something like this one maybe it's 200 watt hours, and I've got a little 8-inch house fan, a little shelf fan that I use sometimes in the Jeep. And it runs 24 watts. So if it's 200, 24, 7, 8 hours is how long it'll run that fan. Okay, you just take the watt hours divided by the watts, and that gives you how many hours it'll run that object. Now, the thing you've got to keep in mind about that is if you're using multiple objects, if you're powering multiple devices, all that adds up, and all that is taken out of the capacity of the battery. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about terminology-wise is there are primarily 2 kinds of batteries that we're dealing with when we're dealing with these power units like this. And that is lithium-ion, which are the most common. Lithium-ions have been around forever. Most of your EVs right now, I think, don't quote me on this, I think are lithium-ion. A couple problems with lithium-ion. First of all, they can possibly be a little unstable. They don't take damage well, and they have a limited number of times that you can recharge them. For instance, this unit here is a lithium ion. They talk cycles when they talk about how many times an item can be recharged. This one can be recharged 500 times. At the end of that 500 times, it's not like it becomes inoperable, but rather its capacity is lowered to about 80% of its original capacity. And then, 500 more times, and it keeps kind of just degrading the battery and stepping it down. Then there's another kind of battery, a newer type of battery that I think a lot of the EVs are starting to head for if they're lithium based. Now there's some solid state stuff coming out. I'm not a huge EV fan. I don't really keep up with that stuff. But I do know that there is, as far as battery technology goes, there are some other like I say, solid state. I think there's a sodium battery or something out there that have different characteristics. This is a lithium ion, but this one is a LiFePO 4. It's a lithium iron phosphate battery. The lithium iron phosphates have a lot more cycles. This one is rated at 2,500 cycles, so I could drop it and recharge it, drop it, recharge it 2,500 times. I've seen some that claim to be 3,000, 3,500. My bigger unit here is rated at 800 cycles, you know? So you just kind of got to think about, A, how much power do you actually need? B, how long do you need to power that thing? And C, to a lesser degree, how long do you want to keep this thing? How long is this thing going to be something that you use 10 times a week? Charge it 10 times a week, charge it every day, or is this something you're going to charge every 3 weeks when you go camping? Just a thought. There is a bit more of a safety factor with the LiFePO 4 batteries as opposed to lithium ion batteries, but I don't know how big of an issue that is, but it is an issue. You know, you see some of these EV fires with lithium ion battery, and they are ugly. They're bad. So we're going to talk about the units that I use. So first of all, sorry for sitting in the chair. I never know when I'm cutting my head off. This is a little power pack. You can get these on Amazon for 15, 20 bucks. I believe this one is either 30 or 40,000 milliamps. So it'll charge my phone 3 or 4 times. It's got a little solar panel right here in the front. Set it out. The solar panel is so small, it's really just a trickle charger. It doesn't do much, but it does do a little bit. I put a little piece of Velcro on the back, and I Velcroed on the dash of the Jeep. Charges all the time. It's constantly getting, you know, a watt and a half maybe of input, not much, but it's a little bit and it adds up, you know. So even during the week when I'm not driving, it's just parked out on the street, parked in the back, whatever. As long as it's getting sun, it's getting a little bit of power, so that's worth it. This particular one has 2 USB ports. If I can get the thing open. 1 micro SD and 1 C. So pretty much everything that you're going to need. It's even got a little flashlight. I'm not 100% sure I can turn it on. There you go. Got a little flashlight you can use at night. Let's face it, it's all but worthless. The power pack itself, though, is very handy. I use it to charge my camera batteries. Anything little that you have that you don't want to drain your big batteries from. Okay, so then we step up to, this is my Jackery 240. The 240 is, now I guess before we go further, there's something else we need to talk about. You talk about sustained and burst. Sustained wattage is the wattage that it will run, that a device will run at for on a consistent basis. All electronic devices, as they fire up, they require more energy, more electricity, more power. So that's the burst, and then it comes back down. That's why if you've got central air in your house, it's the middle of summer, and the central air kicks on. Lots of times the lights in your house will dim. That's because the central air is going, I need massive amounts of power. And then it gets going, and then it goes, okay, now I don't need quite as much. Same kind of thing. Fire up a hair dryer, fire up, anything electric is going to initially have a little burst. So this one is 200 watts sustained and 400 watts burst. And it has 250 watt hours. So this one, for instance, will run my little house fan that I was talking about earlier, my little 8-inch shelf fan. Runs about 24 watts. It'll run it for about 10 hours. It's not bad. This is actually what I started with. It's great for, you can charge your laptop 2 or 3 times. You can charge your phone 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. I can charge all the lights, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. But I discovered that I needed more, not necessarily more capacity, but I needed more wattage. So then I stepped up to the Bluetti EB3A. That's this one. Well, this one, I got it about 2 Black Fridays ago for $150. They run about $220 online now, and this is a Jackery 240. And Jackery makes all kinds of different sizes. This is one of the smallest ones that they have. After I discovered that I needed a little bit more power, not necessarily capacity, I went to the Bluetti EB3A. The EB3A has 600 watt sustained and 1200 watt burst. That's pretty darn good. That's going to power most of what you want. I went up because I have this little immersion blender that I wanted to use to make, various things, and this one just wouldn't hardly power it. It was too much for it. But this one powers it like a champ. This one has 240 watt hours, this one has 270 watt hours. So as far as the capacity goes, they're almost identical. This one just puts out a little bit more power, okay? So then once I used this one for a while, then I realized, you know, it'd be really nice to have a 12 volt fridge. I wouldn't have to be worrying about ice all the time. You know, even if you get a Yeti, you know, if you're going out for a week, you're still gonna have to worry about ice. You're gonna have to go into town, you're gonna have to get ice, blah, blah, blah. I didn't wanna do that. I didn't wanna be hassled with ice, didn't want any of that stuff. So I thought, I need a bigger unit. I also wanted a bigger unit because, you know, I want to put a little, eventually I'm going to mount a little 24-inch TV on the ceiling in the Jeep. Thought that would be kind of neat. Sometimes I run a little projector with a DVD player, a Blu-ray player, and I like to project it up on a screen out and watch movies, that kind of thing. So I need a little bit more capacity, okay? So that's where this one came in. This is an Ecoflow Delta 2 Mini, okay? This one is 1400 watts sustained, 2100 watt burst. That is a lot. This one has quite a bit of power. For capacity, it has 870 watt hours, okay? So this one will run, for instance, this little fridge right here is 40 watts. If I keep it about 25, 26 degrees on the freezer side, which isn't really freezer temperature necessarily, it should be colder than that to freeze. I don't use it for that. I use it as a big refrigerator. I'm not worried about keeping stuff frozen. So it's 27 degrees in the bottom. It usually runs about 35, 36, 37 at the top. It's perfect for vegetables and just kind of keeping things cool. So this one runs 40 watts is what it's rated at, but it doesn't always run. It only runs about half the time, unless with this little, I got this cool little jacket in here recently to put on it to kind of help keep the cool in and save a little bit on the electricity, okay? So 40 watts, but only runs about half the time, okay? So for math's sake, this is 870 watt hours. This one is 40 watts, but only runs half the time. So essentially that's 20, maybe 30 if it runs a little bit more, maybe 30 watts, okay? So we'll call it 20 for math's sake. So 870 watt hours divided by 20 watts is about a little over 40 hours that it will run this fridge without being recharged, okay? Now, they all have, there's all kinds of different ways that you can charge your power units. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna show you my Briefcase solar here in just a second. Up top, you know, on the Jeep, I've got a 100-watt solar panel on top. I keep a 500-watt pure sine wave inverter just for emergencies. I can actually fire the Jeep up, hook this, clamp this to the battery, and plug in these devices, whichever one needs charge, and I can actually charge it from the Jeep. Originally, I was going to buy a generator. I hate generators. They're loud, they're obnoxious, they tick your neighbors off when you're out camping. But you know, if I idle the car, it doesn't burn much gas idle. It usually can generate 300 to 400 watts, more than most of these can handle. This one has a limit of 60 watts. This one, I believe, this one has a limit of like 150 or 200 watts, but there's a little switch back here on the back. In an emergency, it's bad for the battery, but in an emergency, you can fast charge it, in which case it will take up to 500 watts, okay? So 500 watts, 870 watt hour battery, takes about an hour and a half to charge it. That's pretty dang good. This one, 270 watt hours, we'll call it 100 watt input, so 3 hours, 2.7 hours and it's charged. This one, 60 watt max input, 240, about 4 hours to charge it at maximum input. Now sometimes you don't always get maximum input. That's why on my solar panel on the top I have it so that I can tilt it so that I can actually keep it at a 90-degree angle, a perpendicular angle to the sun. That's when you get your most power, okay? So I'm going to take you over here and I'm going to show you my little Briefcase setup. So this is my little Briefcase solar panel, and they're relatively inexpensive. That one actually cost me a little more than I thought it was probably worth. I think it was 170. You can get some for, you know, more like 120. But it's a good solid unit. Really not bad. I kind of like it, actually. So, probably just cut my head off that whole time, as usual. I always do that. So I've got my, as far as charging, I've got my briefcase panel, my rooftop panel, my inverter, and then my little one has its own solar panel. Okay, so that's how I keep charged up, and I can do that essentially indefinitely out in the field. This one here, let's talk a little bit about it. So this one, so I'll start down here. So the Jackery has 2 USBs, one 110 volt and one 12 volt. You know, like a cigarette power, like a cigarette lighter in your car. If you're old, you know what a cigarette lighter in your car is. And it has an 8mm input. This one has 2 USBs, one USB-C, one. This is the input here. It's got an 8mm input, 2 110, and it's got a light, and it's got a little 12 volt input as well. Okay. Now this one has a lot more different options. So this one on the front has 2 USB A's. It's got a USB fast charge. It's got a USB-C. Back here, it's got 5 110 volt and one 12 volt. Okay. It has a couple different ways that you can charge it. One is the it's called an MPT, I believe, an MPT adapter. That's what it comes with. It also uses just a standard, basically like a computer power cord. Same thing. It just plugs into the back when you're home. You plug it into your wall and you're good to go. So that's how I stay powered up in the field. It's real important to have power. If for nothing else, for lights. One of the most important safety items that you can carry with you is a good light. If you can't see the problem, if you can't see the threat, you can't deal with it. So you've got to have light. That's all there is to it. All right, so we talked about lithium ion, we talked about lithium phosphate, different kinds of ways of charging it, different units. And again, my big one here really isn't big. It's lower mid-range. I mean, you could buy units that are 2,000-3,000 watt hours and up. Sky's the limit. Bluetti actually makes a unit that is expandable. You can just keep stacking batteries onto it. That would be more for like a house situation, that kind of thing. Now, the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, I know a lot of you are probably going to be going, oh, no, Rich, you don't know what you're talking about. You need a solar panel with a controller and a deep cycle battery, and those are great. Those are fantastic units. Those are absolutely fabulous. You see those a lot, especially like RVs and stuff like that. I didn't go that route because I don't have enough room for that. I have room for one solar panel on the roof. One solar panel on a big setup system like that isn't going to do jack squat. Secondly, it requires a little bit more room for the controller, you got to have an inverter with it, for the actual battery. I mean, these are, you know, size of car batteries. And, you know, most people will have, you know, a couple 100 amp hour batteries, you know, maybe even 3 or 4. It's a big deal. It's not expensive to do a system like that. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's probably kind of cheaper. This unit here, for instance, was $549, $209, $150. So, you know, for 1,000 amp system, you know, paying $700 or $900 is not out of the, or 1,000 watt hour is not out of the question. But, you know, I have a lot of friends who have solar systems like that, and those are great. They really are. They're fantastic. But I just don't have the need. When I go camping, I only really ever take one of these. Just for this video, I decided to bring them all out just to kind of show you. Typically, I bring my Bluetti. I like it the best. It's got a little more oomph in it. If I want to run something that requires a little more power, if I bring my 12-volt fridge, which I wouldn't normally do that. I don't know, this is a single overnighter. I would never bring my 12-volt on a single overnighter. I would just throw it in my cooler. But again, for purposes of this video, I wanted to show that. And that's really the only time I take my big one with me. The great thing about these units, which we found out just recently, about 3 weeks ago, we had a huge storm that rolled through town. We had, gosh, I think 65, 70, 75 mile an hour winds, just tons of trees down. About half the town was without power for, well, from Sunday to Thursday. So 4 or 5 days, these poor people are without power. And these helped a lot. Now, I was an idiot. I had just gotten back from Colorado. They were all depleted. Most of them had about 10, 15% left on them. I hadn't recharged them. It's nighttime, it's dark, there's no power. I got 10, 15%. So I had to actually go out, start up the Jeep, and charge them on the Jeep, so that I could then bring them back inside and use them to power little fans, lights, charge phones, that kind of thing. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope it made sense. It's a hard thing to talk about with power, but there we go. Love you freaks. Love on them hard, babies.